Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the November 1st, 2016 meeting of the Los Gatos Town Council. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Marcia Jensen.
Here.
Councilmember Rob Rennie.
Here.
Councilmember Steve Leonardis.
Here.
Vice Mayor Mariko Sayak.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Barbara Spector.
Here. The next thing on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. At each meeting, we ask a stellar member, young member of our community, to come forward and lead us in the pledge. That stellar young individual this evening is Lucas Raspy. Lucas, you want to come on up? Before we get started, you have to take a look over there because all of your fans want pictures of you. Okay. So while his mom and dad and family are taking pictures of him, let me tell you a little bit about Lucas. He goes to Fisher Middle School. He's in the 7th grade. And I get a lot of information about these individuals, and I usually summarize it, but for him, on his activities and so forth, this is the whole list because there was no way that I could summarize it. Lucas is a member of the Los Gatos Panthers Pop Warner football team and also participates in the Fisher Cooking Club and Fisher Speech and Delegate Club. He maintains a 4.0 GPA, and his favorite subject is science. And the reason that I couldn't summarize that is because of the diversity of the activities in which he is engaged. And I think that was fantastic. So let's give Lucas a round of applause. And as I hand him the microphone, let's stand.
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In case you're short on candy.
Thank you. Another round of applause. Before we get to our small business big applause, I believe we have the CAFR. Is that going to be our first item? What we're going to be doing now is presenting the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting, the CAFR. Here to receive it is our Finance Director, Steve Conway. And Steve, other than me telling the folks here that you're receiving this or the town's receiving this for fiscal year 2015, why don't you explain to everybody, in a way that I can't, what it is all about?
Thank you, Mayor. The Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting is a program that's performed by the Government Finance Officers Association based in Chicago. With another branch in Washington, D.C. And the point of the award program is to have financial reports that meet certain criteria that follow all the latest governmental accounting standards and report consistently across the country so that when you're comparing city financial reports, you have comparable information to compare and see how your city's doing. So that in a nutshell and is really what the program is about. And so there's some standards that must be adhered to in terms of how you disclose your financial information and how you talk and your transparency and your footnotes on all the financial activities of the town are done correctly. And so this provides a platform that hopefully will provide comparability across the nation for cities and large and small. And it's a fairly rigorous program. We have to show that we've demonstrated we've complied with all the federal and federally promulgated governmental accounting standards. And we have done this for about the past 16 years. So thank you.
Trying to grab that away from you. I don't want. Are you done?
I am done.
All right. As the mayor and on behalf of the entire town of Los Gatos, let's give him a round of applause. Now, in the past, I seem to recall that we actually handed Steve something. Is there some kind of a plaque or something that I'm supposed to be giving him? Or do you already have it?
Actually, for this year, to save money, we're a group of accountants who are very frugal. They gave us a little brass button that we can put on our plaque on the wall, so it would be too small for you to hand it to me. We had to save money. But thank you.
Thank you again. Once a month, on behalf of the entire council, as mayor, I have the privilege and opportunity to give an award to our Small Business of the Month. Now, we call the award Small Business Big Applause, and it is awarded to a business that has served Los Gatos, the individuals who visit here, the individuals who work here, very well for an extended period of time. And so before I call him up here, let's give a round of applause to the business of the month. It is Boulevard Coffee. Now, I know from what I heard and what I see that you have a lot of fans up here. So will all the representatives of Boulevard Coffee who want to come up forward, please come forward. All right, well, they want you to stand on either side of me. And I'll start, I start over here, and I'm going to give you the microphone, and if you could introduce yourselves.
My name's Cristina Olvera, and I am a co-owner with my husband, Humberto Olvera. And this is our daughter, Kendra, our son, Monty, and our youngest son, Giovanni.
I will be presenting Boulevard Coffee with a plaque, and this is a proclamation that has been signed by all of the members of our council. But I just wanted to share with you some of the provisions of that commendation. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but portions of it that I thought were significant to this specific business. It has been operated and owned by Humberto and Cristina Olivera since 1996. They are in their current location since 2011. They chose Los Gatos for the town's small town feel and the service and support of the community. In return for what they have received from the community, what they do is they support many local nonprofit organizations, including Los Gatos schools, and therefore with its success in Los Gatos, they were recently able to expand into a second location in San Jose. However, they are still maintaining their first location in Los Gatos. Their home. Round of applause. Hey, Humberto. Who's our photographer there? My dad. Your dad. Okay, and your dad have a name? George. Thank you, George. Now, does one of you want to say something? I think so.
We just want to say thank you. Like I said, Los Gatos is our home. This is definitely a family business. We are so grateful to the town. Not only did you help us open and start, but when we had to move in 2011, it was a little stressful. It was a little scary. And we were in this room several times, but nothing but truly love and support from the town of Los Gatos and all the officers at that time. So we will forever be grateful for helping us create that small town business here. And then we were able to take it, like I said, to the city of San Jose, but there's nothing like the small town feel of Los Gatos. So thank you.
Anybody else want to say anything? Nobody? Okay. Oh, I think you.
I just want to say thank you for the support that we get with everybody here in the town, and I love the town, and I'm looking for many more years to be here.
Thank you.
We'd like to leave everybody coffee. So
Really?
I'll leave these cards for everybody to take at their.
Wow, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, another thing, we've been this long here in the town of Gatos. My son wasn't born yet when we started the business. Now he's working there, and and yeah, we're very proud of him. And thank you,
And
everybody, for the support.
the one that you were talking about is
That's my son, Monty.
Monty. Okay. This is, thank you very much. This is very interesting because this is not the first time this issue has come up. We've had other small business big applause where they've been standing up here and they're saying, well, this was the first generation and this is the second generation and we're planning on having a third generation. It's like pressure on the person who's uphill. Okay? So congratulations, and I look forward to your future in Los Gatos, Monty. I am going to pass this packet of cards down to staff and leave it to staff to distribute them. And thank you very much, Boulevard Coffee. That's great. All right, back to the less exciting work, but still important. Closed session report.
Good evening. Prior to tonight's regular session, council met in closed session to discuss the town attorney's evaluation. No action was taken and requires reporting under the Brown Act.
Thank you. Council town manager reports, beginning with the council reports. Ms. Jensen.
As council members, we attend various meetings of different bodies where we represent the town of Los Gatos, and so we report back to the community and to the council on what we did. This month, or actually in the last 2 weeks, I went to the Santa Clara Valley Water District board meeting and policy meeting, and many of you might be interested to know that one of the subject matters discussed was pricing. I know that's a hot topic here in Los Gatos, and I believe we have a meeting scheduled on November 14th. But there was no decisions that were made. It was just a presentation of policy and how that pricing was happening. We also got a drought report. I also attended, along with the Vice Mayor, the policy committee meeting, and along with the Vice Mayor, the Chamber of Commerce annual dinner honoring local businesses. And also along with the Vice Mayor, a Silicon Valley Brokers Breakfast. Thank you to Monica Wren, our Economic Development Director, who presented very interesting statistics along with other communities in the area, Cupertino and Campbell, that we heard about, and how different what they referred to as opportunities exist in those various communities and what they are doing. It was quite interesting, actually. So thank you very much.
Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. So the main thing I did was I attended the Cal LAFCO conference last week from Wednesday through Friday. And it was, a conference is mostly a learning opportunity, and I wrote notes and sent to the town manager that can share. I think she sent it already to council members to share my notes from what I learned. I also represented the commission. I'm appointed from the Cities Association onto the LAFCO Commission. I represented the commission as the voting member when we were electing people to the Cal LAFCO, which is kind of a high-level LAFCO organization to help lobby the legislator in terms of LAFCO. Just quickly, what is LAFCO? Their mission is about annexing land into the cities from the county. They protect open space and ag land and prevent sprawl, and they ensure the efficient delivery of services, which includes overseeing special districts such as water, open space, fire, sewer, and there's even some cemetery districts. So a little history on a little bit about LAFCO. Thank you.
Thank you. Since the last meeting, I attended a meeting of the General Plan Committee, which has begun its examination of the North 40 specific plan. We haven't completed our work, but I just wanted to point out the members of that committee were exemplary in the preparation that they brought to the meeting and their analysis of the issues which came forward. On a lighter note, I joined Superior Court Judge Phil Pennypacker and County Supervisor Mike Wasserman this past, I think it was Saturday, and we were at Butcher Park in San Jose, where we were the judges for costumes on dogs. We did that. It was actually sort of hard because there were so many dogs and the costumes were so good. But the monies for that event went to support Butcher Park. Ms. Sayak.
I have no additional items to report other than that's what's been stated.
Mr. Leonardis.
And I have no items this evening.
Thank you all. Manager matters.
Thank you. I have 3 announcements for you this evening. First, we have a series of Almond Grove community meetings coming up to discuss the Phase 2 streets and the potential needs to remove some trees. Tomorrow night is the first meeting, and it will be at the Police Operations Building focused on Tate Street. The next meeting will be on November 8th, focused on Almendra Avenue, and on that will be on November 8th, and the third meeting will be all the other Phase 2 streets on November 10th. All meetings are from 6 to 8 p.m. in our Police Operations Building on Los Gatos Boulevard, and we welcome the community to join us. Another community meeting coming up that was mentioned is the November 14th water bill meeting. We've got representatives from the water company and the water district joining us to discuss the recent rates. And the community is welcome to join us here in these chambers at 6 p.m. on the 14th of November. And then third, we are still recruiting for boards and commissions. Recruitment ends on November 18th. Please see our clerk department website for more details. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is called the consent calendar. This evening we have 3 items on the consent calendar. They will all be acted upon in one motion unless someone from the council or the community removes an item from the consent calendar. In that regard, I do have agenda item 3 that has been removed from a member of the community, and so that will be heard in its normal order. That leaves agenda items 1 and 2. Does any member from the council wish to remove one of those items? Seeing no one, I don't have a card, but does anyone from the community wish to remove item 1 or 2 from the consent calendar? Seeing no one, may I have a motion? Mr. Leonardis.
Motion to approve consent calendar items 1 and 2.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Agenda item 3, which was the item removed from the consent calendar, is the townwide traffic signal system upgrade project. That item has been pulled by Angelia Dorner. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with our staff report, and then after that I'll have Ms. Dorner come forward, and then if anyone else from the community wishes to address us on this item, since it is on the agenda, it is a public hearing, you may do so. I gather Mr. Morley is making our report.
Thank you very much. Earlier in the year, the town applied for a grant through the VTA to do an upgrade to our traffic signal system throughout the town. We were successful in receiving an allocation of $500,000, the maximum award amount within that grant, and this item would allow for the award of that and the acceptance of that, granting the town manager the authority to sign the necessary documents. We would hope to program this the project into the future as we further develop the specifications and bring some needed improvements to our traffic signal system. And with that, that concludes staff's report.
Ms. Jensen.
2 questions. One comment. Congratulations on getting a $500,000 grant. First question is, does this project contemplate a smart signal system and you could explain to the members of the public what that is, but is that included?
To go into a little more detail, as we originally envisioned the project, it was nearly a $3 million project, so it tells you a little bit about what our need is to upgrade all of our traffic signal systems to a new, current, modern system. Within that proposal was, yes, indeed, a smart signal system that would allow for a very significant coordination between traffic signals, so traffic signals would be able to talk to each other and coordinate the movement of vehicles as the traffic demand requires it, versus a current system where it's more of a time-based system, and some overlap with sensors there. So the system was significantly more advanced in its use of technology, and really allows for the traffic to flow through what tends to be the pinch points on our town streets, which is the traffic signals. So that was the big improvement there. Our original intent was to utilize some potential traffic impact fees that we saw coming in the future. If those fees indeed develop over the near or the long term, we'll be able to use them. Otherwise, we'll scale the project accordingly and make improvements that improve the system within the grant limits.
Follow-up? Or a different question. Does the smart signal system allow us to reach signals that are controlled by Caltrans? So I'm thinking of those of Highway 9 and North Santa Cruz and Highway 9 and University that aren't synchronized now. Are we going to be able to do something with those signals?
Our project did include the coordination and the upgrade of the Caltrans signals as well. Obviously, that takes some work with Caltrans to get them on board, and potentially us taking on that responsibility for operation of those signals. So that was a piece yet to come, and it's still out there for us to consider and to work towards. We'll manage expectations a little bit. What we're running into on Highway 9 is a capacity on the highway issue. And so there may be ongoing challenges, although certainly a smart traffic signal system would improve it in terms of making the intersections work to their utmost best possibility.
Thank you.
Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Your report maybe went by really quickly. So you don't yet really have planned which parts of town you plan to apply this to, or do you already have thoughts, maybe Lark Avenue or Los Gatos Boulevard kinds of places?
Yeah, we haven't narrowed down the scope of the project, which is why we don't have a more defined scope for you to review today, and that will come forward as we develop that. And again, the reason is that the grant gets only a portion of what we were looking at. I don't know that we would look to concentrate on a corridor, but rather to make incremental improvements across all of our traffic signals. We also are wanting to take a look at bike and ped integration, and we'll bring that forward as we talk about a bicycle and pedestrian master plan and what the potential is to do some dovetailing to overlap there, so that all of this work that we've been talking about starts to dovetail nicely and looks at an integrated system.
Okay, thank you.
In what fiscal year would you contemplate or anticipate the $500,000 being expended?
So the grant is a multi-year grant, so it'll last through 2020, I believe, is the date, 2019, 2020, somewhere in there. So we would expend it across that time frame. That would be the end date. Our hope would be to start to scope a project this year to allow a little bit of flexibility should we be able to expand the scope. And given other things such as a potential ballot measure and other opportunities that could come forward to expand our funding and the capability within that project, and then to program a project over the next 2 or 3 years for implementation.
So, for example, the $500,000 could be spent, just to use numbers, $150,000 a year for 3 years or something like that.
Yeah, there's probably going to be a smaller expenditure at the front end as we do the design, and then a big lump sum payment as we do the construction and the implementation within 1 year.
Other questions? Seeing none, our only speaker card I have, Angelia Dorner.
Hello, I'm Angelia Dorner, proud resident of the Almond Grove, recovered from Halloween. Wasn't sure if I was going to get here tonight. Anyway, there were two reasons why I wanted to pull this, and thank you for your questions of staff because those covered the primary reason that I wanted to pull this consent item. As this is one of the primary or one of the four primary reasons of what we're expecting to get from the Measure B proposal, I wanted to understand how this related to an overall project and what the potential total scope might be, because it is a vote on the ballot this year. The other thing that I wanted to address or ask you to consider is subject C of the agenda of the item, which is to authorize the town manager to execute all future grant documents and agreements with VTA. I look at this as being on the consent calendar is really the only notification that we get as a public and as council that these grants have been awarded or received, and give us an opportunity to know that as other considerations about budgets and things are done. I'd like to use one example quickly, which is the excerpt from item 4 of the staff report, which actually refers to a grant that was awarded that I don't believe was done in this fashion relating to PTAP. And I mean, this thing was done, and I'm glad that we got a grant, but I don't know how much it was for. I don't know what it included. I don't know if it included the report, the extensive report that was included in item 4, which we'll be discussing in a little bit. It does impact staff utilization because without knowing that we got a grant, we would expect that our staff would be doing this work. So all of these are reasons that I think it's important to know up front that grants have been awarded and received, and what the scope of those items might be. The other thing that I think is interesting is that it would be nice to know who gets the award to do the work for, if it's consultants' work or whether it's staff work. In this particular situation, the Nichols consulting report for the design element of the Almond Grove Phase 2 included a statement of qualifications that they were the ones that did the statewide project for all of this MTC updates and updating our database, including Los Gatos. So I was just wondering what the relationship was between QES and Nichols. In that context, it would be nice to know that if we do get these awards, what is the bidding process involved with that? How does someone get selected, similar to all the other budget items that we look at? We'll discuss, I'm sure, the QES-Nichols relationship or whatever in item 4. But those are all things that I think are important, that they continue to be put on the consent calendar versus just letting them be done offline, if you will, by the town manager. Thank you.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you. Again, does anyone wish to address us on this agenda item? It is a public hearing. Seeing no one coming forward, I will close the public testimony portion of this hearing and look to council for questions, motion. Discussion. Ms. Jensen.
I have a question for Ms. Pavetti. Item C, that was just paragraph C, or Mr. Morley. I was assuming that those were going to be items that came in under the $50,000 town manager budget, correct? That you could execute on your own authority?
Well, this is actually just the documents with between the town and VTA. Any subsequent agreement with any design consultant and certainly any award of bid would have to come to you for action.
Just to follow up, can I have an example of what a document would be? An agreement or
Right. So the VTA, in receiving the grant, they put together a contract. It's actually on my desk for signature, and I said we need to go to council to accept the award before I can sign this. So it's basically just the paperwork acknowledging that we are, in fact, agreeing to the terms that the VTA sets for the use of the money. And then as we use the money, as I say, we will be coming forward with specific scopes, bids, and then award of contract with the associated documents.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Ms. Jensen.
Okay, with that, I would like to make a motion to accept the vehicle registration fee grant from the VTA to upgrade traffic signals townwide as per our discussion and whatever comes forward to us from staff in this scope. Authorize a budget adjustment in the amount of $500,000 to recognize receipt of that grant, and to authorize the town manager to execute documents with the understanding and explanation that we've received that when we get to the point of contracting or spending money, that's going to come back to the council.
Second, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. We are now on verbal communications. At this point in our agenda, anyone wishing to address us for 3 minutes on an item that is not on our calendar, may come forward. If you're going to speak on verbal communications, I would ask that you submit a card. Some people already have, and the first person presenting under verbal communications is Bonnie Broderick. Ms. Broderick?
All right, good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council member. I'm Bonnie Broderick. I live in Los Gatos and I work for the Public Health Department. So I'm here to personally invite you to join us at the Healthy Cities Conference on Friday, November 18th at the Tech Museum in downtown San Jose. We wanted to make certain we got out as public health and went to all of our cities and town councils to personally invite you to attend. So the purpose of the conference is to share policy and strategy ideas that cities and towns can adopt to promote and support the health of their employees, the residents, and the visitors in the town. At the conference, a Healthy Cities campaign dashboard for your town, for our town, will be shared with everyone. We have been in contact with your staff to share and review the draft dashboard that we've developed. Thank you. It's okay. And you'll receive a copy of the vetted version later this week. We would like to thank Laurel Pravetti for all her work she's done to date to help us get an accurate dashboard and really look at the work that the town has already done. These dashboards indicate progress that the towns and cities in the county have made to promote active and safe communities, healthy food and beverage environments, and tobacco-free communities, as well as other cross-country strategies to promote the health and safety. So based on the dashboard findings, awards will also be presented at this conference and to acknowledge the amazing work of various cities and towns in the county. So in closing, I'll leave you invitations to this conference, and we hope that we'll see you all there on November 18th. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The other verbal communication card I have is from Kim.
Good evening, Council, everybody. I just wanted to bring it to your attention. I know that's in the news quite a bit about the earthquake readiness and so forth. I've noticed in the town here that there's no landlines, pay phones, phones like that. I was stuck back east when the catastrophic 9/11 and the cell towers, everything went down, so there's no communication at all. It was locked. I wanted to bring it to your attention possibly that, the community could add some pay phones or for emergency purposes. There's nothing right now. Also, the community, I think it might be a good idea to have some type of an event for earthquake readiness in town for everybody. Water, blankets, communication, food, things like that. Possibly, maybe they'll have it. The Christmas parade or something like that, bring the community together and bring that to everybody's attention. That'd be a good idea.
Thank you. Kim, before you leave, question of staff. First of all, if you could just tell Kim and the community what we do, what the town does with regard to general preparedness, and also what information, if any, you have relating to cell phones versus non-cell phones in an emergency.
Thank you. The town takes emergency preparedness very seriously. We have an updated emergency preparedness plan, and as staff, we practice at our Emergency Operations Center. We also work with our volunteers through CERT to make sure that we have community members who are trained, and we're happy to engage with community groups for additional readiness preparation. We do like your idea for a community-wide event, so that's something that we'll talk about with our staff. You're welcome to visit our website where we do have emergency information posted. So, and there's some good links to resources.
Yeah, the real main concern was the communication. The total block, it was down completely. And even when, the 89, there was not a lot of cell phones back then, but it might be a good idea to add something in there for everybody would, could use. I mean, there's landlines in stores and things like that, but, you can't get to the stores if they're, so.
I have a question for you here, Mr. Rennie.
I was going to add, or maybe let the chief add if he wants. So the CERT members, I'm the Community Emergency Response Team member team leader for the Almond Grove, and I'd say that the CERT has planning to put out little sandwich boards that say 911 access when everything goes down, and use the ham radio networks to, so if people have emergency kinds of things, they can find those CERT members that are using their ham radios to get help. Does the chief want to add anything to that? No?
No, I think we actively train with our CERT groups throughout the county. We have different training that's provided to those members. As the councilman said, one of our primary ways to communicate, if in fact those cell towers and others went down, would be through our ham radios, at least on a local level. And so I could provide you more information on that and some of those training and opportunities there if you chose.
Yeah, because I'm like the Grammies and grandpas don't know what to do, and they probably, they might not have a landline, and they might, their cell line is down, and, things like that, just around the town for just emergency purposes. Even if somebody has a car problem or, something like that, they can go to that emergency phone and use it,
I'm going to encourage you to speak with the chief and get the information that he has. And thank you very much for bringing this forward.
Sure. I have one last thing here. Really quick, I forgot I was going to tell you about the flags that is used in town is fantastic. People use those, every day. I see that. But there's a problem towards the end of coming into town, Safeway, T-Bird's Pizza. There's no flags down there, and I've seen a lot of elderly. They can't cross the road, so maybe they can add some flags down there too, so it'd be real helpful. So,
thank you.
Okay, thank you.
It's helpful.
Thank you very much.
I have no other cards for verbal communications. All right, so we will now go on to the next portion of our agenda, which is called Other Business. Agenda item 4 is to receive an update on the town street pavement management program. Staff report, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Lisa Peterson, Town Engineer, and I am here tonight to give a report on the Street Pavement Management Program. So this is an informational item that was based on a council request from the last budget cycle. And the council does have a memo tonight that details the town's pavement management program and also the town's pavement management software, which is called Street Saver. And attached to that memo is our budget options report. And that budget options report shows how different budgets can affect the overall condition of our pavements. Now, the report was developed by QES, and that is a pavement consultant that is selected and paid for through the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. So no money is passed through the town for that consultant. We don't sign a contract for them, to answer that question that came up. Now tonight I did want to highlight 3 elements from the report. And the first one I wanted to highlight is that Street Saver is a high-level tool for pavement review. So it is good for an overview of the town's pavement condition and how changing the budget can affect that condition. Now, the budget options report is developed from the Street Saver program. The Street Saver program and this budget options report has given us 6 different budget scenarios to look at, and those range anywhere from spending $28 million over a course of 5 years to obtain an optimum PCI in the high 70s to not spending any money on our pavements at all. Now, staff is currently moving forward with scenario 2 that is described in that budget options report, and that is using the town allocated council approved pavement management budget over a 5-year period. Currently, our PCI in the town is around a 66, which is considered fair condition. And what the budget options report shows us is that spending the council-approved budget, that pavement condition index will go down slowly over a period of 5 years to about 64 after a period of 5 years. Now, the budget options report also shows that if we don't spend any money on our pavements, that the degradation of our streets would increase to about 2 points per year for our PCI. So the second element that I wanted to highlight is that it costs less to maintain our streets when they're in good condition. And the analogy that was used in the report is similar to maintenance on a car. So if you buy a new car and you change the oil every 3,000 to 7,000 miles and do minor maintenance to your car, it could last for many years in good condition. And this is similar to our pavements. Now, this is a chart that Council has seen before, which is our pavement degradation curve. And as you can see, the red line shows what happens to pavements over a period of years if no maintenance has been done on those pavements. Now, the green lines show that if we can get to our pavements when they're in good condition and put on surface seals such as slurry seals, we can keep those pavements in good condition for many years and then ultimately come in with a minor rehab and bring those back into good condition instead of having to go through and wait till our pavements get into very bad shape, have to do major rehabilitation, and ultimately could cost us about 40 times more to do those types of rehabilitation treatments. Now, the third element that I wanted to highlight is that Street Saver cannot on its own create a project. So Street Saver is just one tool of many tools that we use to ultimately create a project. So this is a project development process chart that Council has seen before, and this is industry standard where towns or cities will take the high-level list that Street Saver provides. Additionally, just having discussions with the maintenance division on streets that could be dropping into more expensive repair categories. In-depth engineering street surveys are done on each one of these streets, looking at the actual appropriate treatment, upcoming works, street proximity, nearby streets, and then ultimately developing the project list and the estimate for the project. So our next steps with our pavement management program is we will be developing our annual 2016-17 street maintenance project. We are hoping to come back to Council in March to have that approved and construct that in the summer. Now, Council is having a priority setting session at the end of January, and at that time some decisions can be made on the future maintenance level that the Council would like to see and allocate funding appropriate to that level. And once that allocation is made, that would be reflected in our fiscal year 17-18 5-year CIP budget. And that's the end of my report, and I am available to answer any questions.
Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Thank you, Ms. Peterson, for your report. As I was reading it, I was really trying to understand what deferred maintenance cost really means. And if I direct your attention to page 4 of the staff report, where you talk about the different budget scenarios, and number one, so the number one says, well, if we bring it up to a PCI of 78 for cost a total of $28 million, there's no deferred maintenance. And I think it's somewhere else in the description says there's no deferred maintenance. Yet we have some streets that are still in the very poor condition. So that sounds like you have deferred maintenance. So can you help me understand what is deferred maintenance? What are we bringing the standard up to? Is 78 the gold standard?
So
average?
Yeah. So for every different jurisdiction, there could be a different optimum pavement condition index that you can achieve, and the way that is determined is based on how streets are treated. So if you went in on every single street and as they drop to below a 70 PCI, you went in there and put an overlay on those streets would all go up to 100, and you could ultimately have an optimum PCI of all your streets of 100. But because we do more cost-effective measures here in the town, such as doing slurry seals and rubber cape seals. When we go into those streets, when they drop below a PCI of 70, they won't necessarily go up to 100. They might go up to the high 70s, which is what it's reflecting here in our optimum pavement condition index.
So if I could follow up on that. So again, trying to think through this a little bit. Again, we'll use the scenario where we claim we have no deferred maintenance, yet we have some streets that are in bad condition. So I'm assuming then maybe what you're saying is at that point, there's no streets we need to do sort of cheap maintenance on. We only have reconstruction streets. We don't have ones that need slurry or chip seal. Is that a better understanding for me?
So for our unconstrained needs analysis, we are taking care of all of our deferred street maintenance. But ultimately, it is not necessarily going up to 100 because of how we are deferring, how we are treating the streets, because we are using more effective treatments.
And let me just add that in Section 7 of the QES report, there are definitions, including deferred maintenance, as well as the definition of preventative maintenance. And so those definitions are contained.
I did read it. I'm not sure it helped me understand the dollar number and why at 78 we say we have nothing. So maybe if I could just follow up one more time. So one thing I did is I went through year 1 through 6 and I added up what you say we would spend over 5 years and then the deferred maintenance, and I got total numbers when I go through there that are they're not the same, which you sort of would expect they would be the same. So like number 2, I get a total of $26.6 million. Number 3, I get $25.7 million. Number 4, if you brought it to a 72, it would be $27 million. Yet if you brought it to a 70, you would get a total of $24.3 million. So the numbers don't come to the same place, which helps me not understand the whole thing very well. And I realize I'm doing a different math than you've tried to do, but for me, I was sort of expecting the numbers to hit the same place, and they don't.
So for budget scenario 2, and I think it's important to note that what's showing in the report is how it's increasing over each year period of time. So you wouldn't necessarily add all those together. So for example, in budget scenario 2, it shows that the deferred maintenance would ultimately grow to $19.2 million is what it's showing. And again, it's also important to remember when you're looking at the deferred maintenance for each of those initial streets, when it's showing, or each of the initial years when it's showing the deferred maintenance, that deferred maintenance is going to be coming down a little bit with the pavement treatments that you're doing that year. So it can be a little complicated and hard to understand the deferred maintenance, because it also depends at what point you take it. So if you're looking at your deferred maintenance last August 15th versus looking at your deferred maintenance today, it's going to change based on how the pavements have changed with that pavement degradation curve and also with the new treatments that you have put out there on your street. So it's a constantly changing number.
So one last comment before I give somebody else a chance, if I could. So number 5, I get the lowest number. It's a PCI of 70. You bring it to PCI of 70, which is, we're now in the fair range. It sounds decent, yet the total of the expenditure and the deferred maintenance is now only 24.3, which is, say, quite a bit lower than if we brought it to 72 and the total would be 27. So it seems to me that's the optimal scenario because of the dollars are less. Am I right, or in another planet?
Well, I think that ultimately what the council is doing is, looking for what they want their maintenance level to be within the town, and for different cities that can be a different level. I think the deferred maintenance is something that goes up and down, again, based on the treatments that you do, the types of treatments you do on each street, and also the time frame of when you're looking at that deferred maintenance. So it's from a standpoint of making a determination of where we want our future maintenance on the street. I think Street Saver ultimately really looks at trying to make a determination on the PCI that the town or city would like to achieve.
Thank you. I better give somebody else a chance.
All right. Ms. Jensen?
It's a different question, different line of questions. Page 5 of our staff report, the paragraph under conclusion indicates that if Measure B, the transportation tax passes, that we can expect $500,000 a year. Is that correct for our streets?
That is correct.
Okay. I know that there is a PCI level under the, maybe Mr. Morley knows this. Thank you. Mr. Rennie knows it too. That is a level at which if our streets are at that level, any funds we receive from Measure B, we can use at our discretion versus fixing our streets. And that's 70?
Yes.
Mr. Morley?
Yes, it's 70. There's not quite the way you can use the dollars. The dollars still need to be used for street purposes. And it allows a little bit, reaching the 70 target allows a little bit of flexibility in terms of the type of projects you can use the money for within the streets. So it would allow for broader complete streets projects, things like green bicycle lanes and that kind of work. Although, with that said, there's not going to be a whole lot of a gap. There are, even under 70, the definition for the maintenance projects that qualify is essentially back of sidewalk to back of sidewalk, including intersection improvements, streetlight improvements. It's anything in the right of way. So the additional work that you get out of the 70 is it's a nice carrot and a nice target to aim for, but there's not going to be a whole lot that gets included that we're going to miss out on.
But it's higher than zero, correct? I mean, there's a potential for us to have discretionary funds to do some bicycle and pedestrian things under that if we get it to a PCI of 70, correct?
There's a potential for additional dollars.
Thank you.
Other questions? For staff, this report, and this report is the QES report, was prepared prior to the does not assume, okay, let me go backwards, does not assume that the Almond Grove streets have been repaired. First of all, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And I also understand from a follow-up email or memo from staff that even if one assumes that the Almond Grove streets are repaired, it does not have a significant change in the conclusions in this report because the Almond Grove streets are, they call them, they're not arterials or collectors, they're residential.
Yes, that's correct. There is different weighting that the program gives for arterial, collector, and residential streets. Additionally, the Almond Grove streets comprise about 3% of our total miles of network. So from the program's perspective, it's a small amount.
So when do I assume that when the streets issue comes back before us for prioritizing and funding, that there is going to be, from staff's perspective, a focus on the arterials and collectors?
So there will be a focus on arterial collectors, and additionally, we would like to also look at those streets that are in good condition that may be dropping further down to keep them in good condition with inexpensive slurry seals.
Other questions of staff? Ms. Sayak.
Thank you. Same line of questioning. So I'm looking at the QES report, and so it breaks down the various classes, the arterial, collector, residential, and the PCIs differ in our town for each one. Now, I'm assuming arterial are larger streets like Los Gatos Boulevard?
Yes, that's correct.
And so is there, and that has a 59, it has the lowest amount. Is there, when looking at Street Saver and prioritizing which streets, is there any emphasis placed on which functional class has lower PCI because the assumption that more people use certain streets, would that get higher priority? Could you just kind of walk me through why the PCIs are so different? Is it just happened to be where we happen to spend our money?
Yeah, so it ultimately it can change from year to year. So if one year you concentrate on doing residential streets and and collector streets, then of course your arterial network may drop more. And then one year when you come in and you concentrate more on your arterial network, then of course those streets might go up, because it's pretty typical that you would tend to concentrate on certain types of streets, because again, as I mentioned previously, you get cost benefit for grouping streets and doing streets within a similar area.
Isaac.
And so with this year's street improvements, Shannon specifically, that's a arterial or collector?
That actually is considered a collector street.
Okay, so if you look at the amount that we put into this year, would the overall network PCI change from 67, or that the amount that we did this year was basically just to keep us at the same level?
So again, we're moving forward with the budget scenario 2, which is using the council-approved 5-year pavement maintenance budget. And under that scenario, what it shows is that we would slowly be going down in our PCI level.
So it's the trends. It's not necessarily a snapshot year to year of what our PCI is.
It's the trends, and it's how much money we're putting into our program.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions of staff? Seeing none, this is a public hearing, and so if you wish to address us on this item, please submit a card. I do have one. Angelia Dorner.
Hello again. I'm still Angelia Dorner, and I'm still a proud resident of the Almond Grove. Back in February, when we were going over all of the street work and the proposed scope, I prepared a comprehensive analysis for you all, which was about 9 pages long, that went through all of the streets and all of the scope and the budget and everything. And this was the last page, which showed a detail of the PCIs versus the cost per square yard of all of this work. And to summarize what's on this page, what was clear from that analysis was that the PCIs that were being displayed by StreetSaver were significantly different than the cost per square yard that was determined by the scope of work that we said was required. The top bracket of streets, which ranged above 45 PCI, the range of differences was like a PCI of 55 was like $37 compared to 44 of $7.10. But everything in that bracket should have been somewhere between $2 and $25 based on what is in the QES report and what the StreetSaver thing is generating. Similarly, the next bracket of streets that we did work on this past year went from ranges of $54 on one street to the majority of things being $7 per square yard, which should have been, based on those PCIs, anywhere from $25 to $70 on every single street. The worst streets in the scope that we did this year were down in the 20s, and from 21 to 12, how can you get a 12 PCI? The cost of those streets should have been in the reconstruction stage of 70 based on StreetSaver. However, we only determined the scope to be cost per yard of $22 and $8 per square yard. So either there is no, and I did this really fast right before I came here, so there is no credibility in the PCIs or the scope of required work that we're coming up with, or both. Because you can't have a 12 PCI and say that we're only going to do $8 worth of work. Now, one of the things that Lisa did show you was the project development slide, which showed that PCI was a high level, and then you had to do all of these extra things manually, intellectually, to determine what the real scope of work was required and what the cost would be. What you have in that report, QES, is totally unreliable because it is only giving you that high level, which is based on the costs that I'm showing here of reconstruction for streets that are in there at 20s, although we're only doing work at $7. So either, again, the credibility of the PCIs is off, or the scope of work that we're doing is not good. Oh, shoot.
Well, you may have questions. Any questions for Ms. Dorner? I have one question. I do appreciate that you have given this a lot of thought, and so therefore you're able to speak to the subject very quickly. But let me bring you back to the QES report.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, what is the issue that you have with this QES report, if any? What I heard you say was that it's not credible because either I think the PCI is wrong, or the amount that is projected to spend is wrong, or maybe you want to answer my question. What's the problem with this?
Well, the problem is that, as I showed on the one slide, PCIs should relate to that chart that showed that as the PCIs go down, the cost goes up. And that is what the formula is used by StreetSaver to determine this deferred maintenance and how our money is utilized. But as you could see from the scope of work that we did in 2016, the PCIs that were presented by staff were from StreetSaver, but there was no relationship whatsoever to the cost per square yard, the cost of what we did on those streets in relation to the PCIs. So if you have a PCI of 20, you would expect, and StreetSaver would say, that you would be in a reconstruction phase, which would be close to $70 a pop. But we determined by going out there and looking at it and saying, oh, this doesn't make sense. This really isn't 21. We think rubber cape seal is going to be fine. We're just going to do rubber cape seal, which is going to give us another good 6 or 7 years before we have to worry about this street again. Well, the cost of that is only $7 per square yard. But StreetSaver is doing projections based on what it thinks the cost is going to be on the PCI that's in there. So without going through that intellectual process from what these numbers generate per street to what the real cost is based on what our programs are, it's not really reliable as far as making budgetary or other determinations. The other thing that's important is the arterial versus residential streets. If money is, I don't know what the weighting factors are in the StreetSaver, which derives that QES report. I don't know what the weighting factors are for the arterial versus collector streets, or what we have defined as arterial and collector streets in the system. Because the last thing that I could find in any of the council reports on all the street in the last 5 years showed that we only had like 3 streets defined as arterials, and we only had like 3 streets defined as like Wedgwood, University, and 1 other street as a collector. So I don't even know if we have updated what we should as far as collector streets. Now, this was mentioned that Shannon is a collector street. I haven't seen that anywhere, but I think it would be very helpful for you to know what are the arterial streets, what are the collector streets, how are those weighted? Because if you spend money, like you said, on those streets, the impact on our overall PCI is going to be greater than if you spend that same amount of money on residential streets or things like Cypress Way or Oka or whatever. That's only going to give you a small bump. But on the arterials, it's going to give you a much bigger bump because of the classification of the street. So all of those things combined just say these numbers aren't anything personally that I would ever rely on.
Thank you. Other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Dorner. I do not have any other speaker cards on this agenda item. So I will go ahead and close the public testimony portion of this hearing. I was looking at the staff report, and I note that the recommendation is to receive the report and nothing else. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Sorry. It's for informational.
Staff, does the council have anything else? Ms. Sayak?
Thank you. 2 quick questions. Well, actually 3. So the first one, I think the easiest. It's my understanding that MTC provides this for all the cities so that we have at least an assumption of baseline information.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And I think listening to the testimony, I think what I'm hearing is quite similar from what staff is saying, is that this is information to start with, but then it is staff intensive in that you still are going out to verify whether or not the PCI information is realistic, and your input is what is providing the budgetary numbers that we start looking at in March. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then the last question I had was this definition of the arterial collector residential. When is that done? Is it ever re-looked at? And is that something that does have any emphasis in future funding allocations?
So that's something that is identified in our general plan, and it's under the functional classification of roadways. So that's where that's identified.
And so that was looked at eons ago, and unless something significant changes, that's never re-looked at again?
So it was looked at in January 7th, 2011.
Okay, so not eons ago. Okay. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. When this comes back to the council, one of the things that I would be looking for is the definition of these three types of streets, and you say it's in our general plan, so that should be easy enough. And then which streets, roadways, whatever you want to call them, fit under each definition, each category. And then it's not, I don't think your staff's going to come back and say, well, we get the most bang for our buck if we do arterials, so we're just going to do those. So you're going to have some metric where you analyze, this is what our recommendation is regarding funding, and this is why. And as I said, it's probably not going to be, we're going to do all one kind of street or roadway because it's got the lowest PCI. And so I'm going to need, in a very, for me, simplified way, to understand and be given the metric of the decision-making process.
Sure.
All right. Ms. Jensen.
Ms. Pravetti, Ms. Peterson, or Mr. Schultz, aren't arterial, collective, etc., defined under California law? They are part of the vehicle code, and they're used to determine speed limits, among other things, correct? So that we don't independently define what that is in Los Gatos. We simply conform to California law.
Right, or the Caltrans regulations, one of the two, but we can bring back exactly what the California law states for those definitions.
Right, because I know it has to do with, among other things, speed limits. Mm-hmm. And one of the issues with ways is that rather than defining streets under those California law definitions, that they actually, what I'm going to call flatten streets, so that every street looks the same, so that when you get on the computer, it's just going to show you a route, not necessarily something that has 1 lane, 2 lanes, 3 lanes. So that's actually an issue with technology.
Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I guess I wanted to ask a question that could risk making the waters muddier or maybe not. So I'm wondering if it's not absolutely clear what a street, when it's based on its PCI, so its level of how far it's deteriorated, what we spend on it. So for what I'm really trying to say is, if a street's rated, say, a 30 or a 40, you might say, well, that's a reconstruction. We've got to spend a lot of money. But maybe you are also come along, just do a few dig outs and a chip seal, which is not a reconstruction cost, but it could bring that street up to, I don't know, 70s or 80s instead of 100. So is that an option that you're throwing into all the mix, and maybe that helps make it more confusing on why a 40 doesn't equal a reconstruction cost?
Yes, so we do go out there and take a look at the streets, and the ones that we think that we can save with doing dig outs and leveling course and putting a rubber cape seal on it, those are the ones that we would pick up that have low PCIs. The program wouldn't necessarily know that.
And that would not be a reconstruction cost. That would be the much lower sort of maintenance cost.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, I want to thank staff.
Thank
and
you.
We'll see you at the beginning of next year. All right, other business, agenda item 5 is receive a report on efforts in Santa Clara County regarding minimum wage increase and provide direction on next steps. Staff report, please.
Good evening, Monica Wren, Economic Vitality Manager. Before you tonight is a report that updates the council on the regional discussions regarding the minimum wage increase in Santa Clara County. The intent of this report is just to update council on where the other cities are, and then just to look to you to see if there are next steps that you would like to direct staff to take. The Cities Association of Santa Clara County has asked each city to look at adopting an increase in minimum wage up to $15 by 2019. $15 an hour. So page 3 of your staff report does show a snapshot of the other cities in our county and where they currently stand with the adoption or their position on this adoption. Aside from that, our Governor Brown also signed legislation in April which gives a minimum, which raises the state's minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2022, with incremental increases starting this year. In that bill, there are some factors built in, so if we do go into a recession, that can be tapered off. The staff report lays out some high-level discussion points for the council tonight, and it includes 2 attachments. One is a survey and one is a report. They were both done by third-party vendors as a part of the group that was working with the Cities Association. And before you this evening, you have a couple of options. The first would be simply just to receive the report and to take no additional action. That would just mean that the businesses in our town would follow the state requirements, and this would just allow the marketplace to dictate what the salaries in town are, as well as the state requirements. Otherwise, the council could direct the staff to bring this ordinance language back to you for first reading. You could either adopt the Cities Association's recommendation as written, or you could, of course, direct us to include some edits or amendments in that language. This concludes staff's presentation, and we're here to answer any of your questions.
Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I guess I should disclose that I have employees in Los Gatos that would be affected by this. I think at this point it's not a conflict of interest, but I thought I would disclose that at this time.
Thank you, and I'll go to the town attorney.
No, at this point in time, it's not a conflict of interest because his interest is no different than any other business within the town.
All right, thank you.
So there's a public exception to that rule that it'll fall under.
All right, thank you. Other questions of staff? Ms. Sayak.
Thank you. So in general, I appreciate the Cities Association bringing it to all of us. I think on issues like this, I think it's good that we're looking at it on a regional level. I'm looking at the actual letter that they provided to us. I think that's attachment 3. And in it talks about the off-ramp triggers that would allow for these increases to be delayed. And it just says certain economic conditions. And I'm wondering, could you elaborate a little bit more what those economic conditions, are there like specific data that they're looking for? Would those economic conditions be city specific so that if, for example, if we're concerned about sales tax declining, would that be something that would fall under this off-ramp trigger?
I think we may need a couple of minutes to find that response.
Other questions? Seeing none, this is a public hearing, so if anyone wishes to give testimony, please submit a card. I do have a card. Patty Rice.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts on this matter. I'm Patty Rice. I own and operate the Spa Los Gatos over on South Santa Cruz. We've been in business for 17 years there. The common belief is that businesses will just pass along the cost of the increased wages via their prices. For the most part, this is true, but for some businesses, such as mine, it's not so easy to do. I have 2 departments that will be affected, front desk and housekeeping. I've done the calculations, and the increase in the minimum wage will cost me nearly $100,000 a year. And that's only to bring employees up to $15 an hour. It does not take into consideration the staff who's already at $15 and will expect their wages to go up as well. Keep in mind that when the wages do go up, so does the employer payroll taxes and the workers' comp insurance. Our services begin at about $100, and tacking on another $5 or $10 to each service to cover the increased labor costs will be a sensitive and difficult thing to do in today's market. We try to keep our retail products priced as competitive as possible, as we are already going nose to nose with online businesses who don't have the same overhead that we do. The general public is savvy when it comes to shopping and comparing prices, and many will look up prices while they're in the store on the cell phones. I can guarantee you that we will lose sales completely if I try to increase retail prices above the MSRP. Last year, we were hit with the state-mandated 3-day sick pay for everyone, even part-timers. That alone is costing a small fortune in pay and time devoted to record keeping. Higher minimum wage just adds to that expense. The study that you released with the agenda says wages would increase by about 1% for all employers, while restaurants come in at about 9.5%. I haven't had time to go through that entire report to figure out how they got those numbers, but to bring my two departments up to the $15 an hour rate, it pencils out to a 25% and 30% increase. I know I'm not alone in being affected by this. The state has passed incremental increases with full implementation by 2022, and that date's going to be here soon enough. I ask that you follow the state policy and give us small businesses additional time to prepare for these higher costs. Thank you for listening and considering.
Thank you. You may have questions. All right, you have one question here. When you're talking about the impact on your business, are you characterized, or in your mind, is your business part retail and part service?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and the numbers that you gave us with as far as increases to your expenditures and therefore potential increases to your fees, does that apply equally to service versus retail?
I don't expense them out differently.
Okay. And I was going to ask you your thoughts on the fact that this increase is coming down from the state by 2022, but you've answered that question, and I don't see any others. Thank you very much for presenting. I don't have any other cards. Does anyone else wish to address us on this issue of potential minimum wage increases? Seeing none, I go back to the council. This is another one, receive a report, but also potentially provide next steps. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector, for the reasons that Ms. Rice suggested or spoke about. I would be inclined to accept the information in the report, but not take any action at this time and just defer to the state law, which is the Constitution that we all swore to abide by. I do appreciate other cities jumping on board and implementing an accelerated schedule, but I think to protect the small business interests of Los Gatos, in the world of Amazon.com and all the other pressures that they face with their businesses, I think it would be best to, how could I say it, lessen the steepness of the curve, and I'm more comfortable with the 2022 timeframe that the state has laid out on this.
Thank you, Mr. Leonardis. I agree with Mr. Leonardis. The state mandate exists, and as Mr. Leonardis pointed out, we are going to have to comply with that state mandate. The issue of, raising the minimum wage and its impacts is complex. There are the benefits to those who receive the minimum wage. There is the detriment to the businesses, or potential detriment to the businesses that pay it. There's the impact on a large business or large company versus the impact on a small locally owned business, a retail business, service, restaurant, and so forth. So there are a lot of complexities, and so I agree. We're going to have to abide by the state, but I'm not prepared to add any burden above and beyond that. Ms. Jensen.
I was just going to say that to the extent Mr. Leonardis wanted to make that a motion, I would second it.
So moved.
So seconded.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I am supporting the motions for the reasons previously stated. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. We are now on public hearings. Our first one, Agenda Item 6, Town Code Amendment A16001, relating generally to fire prevention and protection. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Joel Paulson, Community Development Director. In December of 2015, the state adopted new building and fire codes. Local jurisdictions are required to implement those as written by January 1st, 2017, or adopt local amendments to those codes to deal with existing factors that may not occur statewide. A number of code officials in the region and across various regions have proposed amendments. We have brought those amendments forward to the council for their consideration. The local amendments help enhance public health and safety, and they also increase the building and fire standards for the buildings within the state, and then specifically tailored to local jurisdictions. The town's also proposing to adopt portions of the 2015 International Property Maintenance Code and the 2015 International Existing Building Code. These codes provide minimum construction requirements and standards for existing buildings, and also contain provisions regarding unsafe structures. They also provide procedures that will help us implement our neighborhood preservation ordinance, which is Chapter 30 of the Town Code. Staff recommends that the council introduce the amendments, the ordinance, to modify Chapter 6 and Chapter 9 of the Town Code. Additionally, there is a desk item for this matter. The matters that were brought up in the desk item are generally relating to general plan safety element implementation. And so those are things that staff will further review. The town for a long time has had in their general plan provisions relating to fire safety because of the concerns and of past events. So a number of those are included. I believe one comment that was made was most of those provisions historically have dealt with defensible space relating to structures. And I believe that the author of that email or letter would like to see the town implement that defensible space requirement for vacant properties. And the town attorney, I'm not sure if you have any additional information, but that concludes staff's report, and we're here available for questions.
Ms. Jensen.
My question is, if the council were to accept your recommendation and just go forward with the material that we have and adopt the ordinance, that does not preclude us from later changing our general plan or adding anything that we think is appropriate at whatever time, correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Let me follow up on something in the staff report and also in our materials, which is the uninhabited property defensible space. What is the staff's input on that?
If it's in reference to the email you received, the government code that he cites only deals with property that has a structure on it. The person from the email believes that we should still use that code section for undeveloped land, but that's not a requirement. And again, I think as Councilmember Jensen mentioned, though, that's something I think we should look at. I've done a little bit of preliminary research, and there are cities and towns that are bordered by such a tremendous amount of undeveloped land that have increased the space. And so that's something I think we can look at, but it's not related to just adopting the state codes. We really have to look at that and see what the repercussions are of putting any requirements on our undeveloped land and go beyond what state law requires.
Is this something that is on a work list, I would assume, for your department?
It is not yet. The safety part of it is the safety element, making sure we look at that after the housing element was developed, because that's required by state law. So that is the issue with the weed abatement. Will come forward for priorities and goals to see if that's an item you want me to take up this next year.
And I would just also offer that in the amendments, the Santa Clara County Fire Department They generally prepare those amendments for the jurisdictions. And there is a section on defensible space that's included in there. And in scanning through it, it does look like it has some measures relating to defensible space at a 30-foot distance for even undeveloped property. So those are things that we can look at further as well, but we'll also make sure that the author of that is aware of those amendments as well.
Thank you. Other questions of staff? This is a public hearing. Anyone wanting to address us on this agenda item may. I don't have any cards. Does anyone want to talk to us? Seeing no one coming forward, I will close the public testimony portion of this hearing and look to the council for a motion. Ms. Jensen.
I would move to introduce the ordinance affecting the amendments of the Town Code, Amendment A16001, and move to waive reading of the ordinance and direct the clerk administrator to read the title of the proposed ordinance. And that motion assumes that we are not precluded from taking further action pursuant to our discussion on safety and defensible space.
Mr. Leonardis?
I'll second the motion.
Look to the clerk.
Ordinance of the Town of Los Gatos repealing and replacing Chapter 6, Building Regulations, and Chapter 9, Fire Prevention and Protection of the Town of Los Gatos Municipal Code and adopting new 2016 California Building and Fire Codes.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 7. Adopt a resolution approving the town's long-term debt policy and adopt a resolution approving the town's investment policy. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve Conway, Director of Finance. Tonight before you are two items. One is the town's long-term debt policy, which has historically been incorporated within the town's adopted budget, but we, for visibility, have brought that forward as a policy for public review and comment, and an update to our investment. The second item is the update to our town's investment policy, which provides us guidelines for how we invest our procedures and what types of instruments we invest the town's funds in accordance with California state law. Regarding the long-term debt policy, what that policy in general is intended to do is just to provide a general framework for any type of debt that's issued by the town. Guidelines that are included in the current policy are more general in nature because each debt issue that would ever come forward, and I don't envision too many debt issues coming forward for the town. We have a history of this town of being very prudent about absorbing any new debt. But if a new debt issue were to come forward, this policy provides some general guidelines requiring staff to do, and also the financial advisors who would be proposing any new debt, do a very comprehensive analysis of any proposed debt issuance. It isn't intended to arrive at a future or provide a policy regarding every possible financing scenario or alternative, because that actually needs to happen when any potential issue is brought forward to council. Our general practice under the policy would that any sort of proposed new debt would require complete analysis by staff that would come forward to council. Council would have a chance to review it, question it, and provide guidance to staff. Public would obviously have a chance to weigh in on that. So this policy wasn't intended to encounter every instance or to cover every small instance, or it was more just good housekeeping in terms of setting some general parameters. We realize that people may have different opinions about, like, for instance, how much percentage of the town's budget could a debt amount grow to. We have a 25% limit in here right now. Our total debt is 5.9% of our operating revenues. And as I've said, I'm not envisioning the town going into any much, we just don't have the capacity to absorb any new debt. Right now, all of our debt that we do have for the town is 100% reimbursed through our redevelopment agency. So we actually have no, if you really look at it, there's actually no general obligation town debt that's even present on the books. However, this policy is designed to provide some general guidance and steps to follow were any new debt to be contemplated. Regarding the investment policy, we've made a few changes. The biggest one is that the world of investments has changed a bit. It used to be that staff would develop relationships with maybe 4 or 5 brokers, get competitive quotes over the phone, and each of those brokers would have to be pre-qualified, meeting the town standards for liquidity and that sort of thing. Our investment advisors asked us to be able to let them do that pre-qualifying, because most of our purchases when we buy an investment such as a treasury bond or treasury note, we are going through the internet now, and we may want to avail of ourselves of 30 quotes versus 6 brokers. We may want to look at Chemical Bank of New York, as long as this broker has qualified them that they're allowed to do business with the town, which still hasn't changed. The policy will require that, but it just gives us a much broader look at people who are willing to sell the town an investment, and we'll get a better return, a better yield, because we obviously have more of a list to pick from. So that will help us in terms of our competition. And there was one other small change just to conform to state law for the investment policy.
Thank you. Do we have questions of staff? Ms. Jensen.
My question is, and I am not, believe me, looking for work for the policy committee because we have a lot on our plate, but why didn't this go to policy committee or the finance committee and get vetted before it came to council? Because we are looking at everything, and I know that we have questions regarding the finance committee. So why did it come in the fashion that it did?
I think I'll let you answer.
So certainly we have some options in terms of how we bring things forward. Our past practice has been just to assume that it's been considered, since it's part of the adopted budget and it's just one of the many pieces of paper that's within the budget. But having read the budget and saw that it actually asks that it come forward to the full council, we thought, well, this is something that's already built in the budget. Let's just go directly to council, make the technical changes to conform with state law, and bring it forward. If the council prefers that it be vetted either or by both council committees, we're certainly happy to do that. But being that these were relatively minor changes, and again, this was something to try and enhance transparency as opposed to just assuming, since we had an adopted budget, that therefore we had adopted policies, we thought it was important to highlight that, in fact, the town does have these 2 financial policies. In the future, since we are recommending that we take a look at these every year, we could certainly take it through the committee process, either or both, the council's preference.
Okay, thank you.
I see no other question. Oh, I do. Ms. Sayak.
Thank you. So, Mr. Conway, I thought I heard you say it, but just want to confirm. So, with debt, we haven't issued any debt recently. That
not since 2010. Okay. The library COP was the last debt issue that the town.
And so, in that example, that the full details of that came to the council, so that the details were vetted by them.
Yes.
And even though we didn't have this policy in place, it provided the framework and the specifics.
We had the policy in place. It was incorporated in our budget, adopted budget, but we wanted to break it out for further visibility. So we brought it forward as an official. It was just included in the budget. It was actually the genesis of this is that to win our budget awards, one of the suggestions that the reviewers in GFOA asked the staff to consider is give us generally your policy regarding how you administer your debt. So we included it in the adopted budget, but now we wanted to make it a policy that's separate.
Got it. And so one of the desk items was some lengthy suggestions on how to improve it, and it looked to my eye, and again, I'm not trained in this area, that it was more specifics of how to look at future debt. But what I'm hearing you say is that any future debt would be coming back to council for a review of those specifics anyway?
That is correct. And actually, because the correspondence came in after 11 a.m. this morning, it was not provided to council as a formal desk item, but each of you received that information.
But it sounds like that discussion with a future debt would happen at a council level.
Yeah, I had a chance to read, and these were good points that the public or some of our wonderful citizens have helped us in the past with some financial issues. These are all good points, and I actually went through each of these bullets, and I cannot think of any future issue that wouldn't address each of these issues in terms of in the staff report. For instance, there's a comment made about avoiding I think they called it backloading debt service. Well, every bond issue that I've ever been professionally part of has what's called a level debt service requirement. In other words, the amount of your annual payments are the same from year to year. The principal and the interest amounts change. But I can't contemplate where you would ever propose a bond issue that would have the first 5 years a teaser rate where you would only be paying a minimal amount. And there's a lot of this stuff is just common sense that you would, in my view, as a finance professional, that you would have to, if you had an esoteric or strange debt service schedule, you would need to do analysis and really convince the council and the public that it's a wise idea. And so I'm thinking, as I've looked through each of these, I feel that they would need to be covered and analyzed. And I think these are all good points, but I think any future debt issue, which, like I said, the town has a very conservative history here, and I'm not even envisioning any debt issues for quite some time, but were one to come forward, these should be considered and should be addressed as part of a staff report.
All right, this is a public hearing, and if you wish to address us on this agenda items, please submit a card. I do have one card, Jack Van Neda.
Good evening, Jack Van Neda. And you did receive the points that I emailed to you earlier today, well past the 11 o'clock deadline. But what I did want to address, I can't address any of these in detail. I am not a CFO. These were developed by people that are much higher financial intellect than myself. But we do have ideas on how to develop the depth and dimension of the points that we've put forth here. We do believe there is potential for debt incurrence in the future with a $53.1 million unfunded liability bill, and it's going to grow, I believe, significantly in the next couple of years with CalPERS investments down as low as they are. So Ms. Prevetti asked for us to come up with some ideas on funding, how you pay for these unfunded liabilities, and debt will be one of the things that we'll be presenting. So I just am speaking for this short time to say that we got this in. We have nothing on investment. We didn't have time to do that. One of our members is traveling. The other member, when I say members in this case, they're the CFO level or above. One's traveling, one is going to be traveling and planning their trip. So we will be able to get some time before the next discussion on funding or financing the unfunded liabilities. And that's it.
Questions? Thank you, sir. I have no other cards. Does anyone want to address us on this agenda item? Seeing no one coming forward, I will now look to the council for discussion, motion, questions. Ms. Jensen.
Okay, I'm going to make motion that we adopt the resolution approving the town's long-term debt policy, and that would be attachment 5, which was our corrected version that we got as a desk item tonight.
Thank you.
And the resolution approving the town's investment policy. And the comment on the motion is that given the understanding that the town's going to continue to work with interested parties to figure out what we need to be considering, and that if we get into a situation where we're going to be considering investments or debt, that we are going to hear that at a council meeting and get a detailed staff report that's going to include these types of bullet points and other information, and that the policies that I am moving approval of are what I'm going to consider basically a baseline that we're going to get information added to. That is my motion.
Do we have a second? Mr. Leonardis.
Second.
I'm going to support the motion. Three thoughts as I was listening and also previously reading. First of all, to the extent that our current debt is our RDA debt and our only debt, I will say that RDA indebtedness was vetted a lot, and it was cautiously considered and entered into. I was also thinking, as I read the staff report, that this would be something that I thought the Finance Committee should or could, I say should have weighed in on. And lastly, with regard to the long-term debt policy, I think that since I agree that the town entering into indebtedness has been minimal except for, or non-existent except for RDA, and I know that was examined a lot. And then with regard to a future investment policy, I appreciated with what the town said. Mr. Conway, I also appreciate what Mr. Van Ada said. And I don't know if the town's going to have to undertake indebtedness in order to pay for unfunded liabilities, or if we're going to be able to continue to address it the way we have, which is within our budget and prorated over years. That's something to be explored. But getting community input, I think getting input from the council and then bringing it up to the council as a whole would be a good process in the future. More discussion. We have a motion on the table. Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Public hearing, agenda item 8. And this is a continued item. It's continued from October 18th, 2016. And this is an agenda item to adopt an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Los Gatos, amending Town Code Chapter 14, Article 11, massage therapy establishments and massage therapy practitioners. Staff report.
Good evening. This is a cleanup ordinance that we are doing based on changes at the state level. In 2008, the state enacted the massage therapy law, which basically took away from the towns and cities the ability to regulate massage therapists and put it under the state control and required certification from the state for massage therapists. After that was done, though, there was quite a bit of opposition from towns and cities because they felt like local land use and the ability to regulate certain types of businesses that go along with massage establishments was taken away from us. So the changes were made in 2015 that allow us the ability, although we cannot regulate massage therapists that are licensed by the state, we can regulate the massage establishments and the businesses that operate as such. And so changes have been made that will give us, if you want to say, another tool in the toolbox, will allow us to regulate massage establishments, the hours, the working conditions, what they can and cannot do. And the staff report lays out all of those quite a bit. We did research on other jurisdictions. We called the district attorney's office and asked them which ones do you feel are the best ordinances, because there are little nuances for the towns and cities that have already adopted the massage establishment ordinance in so that it's in compliance with state law. We felt that the Santa Clara County model was the best, and so did the district attorney. So it is primarily after theirs, with little nuances that apply more specifically to Los Gatos. I did notice after that came out the ordinance that there are some typographical errors and a few other grammatical errors that I will clean up before the item comes back for second reading if it's approved tonight. But I do have a few more substantive changes based on comments from some of the massage establishments in town that I'd like to take you through just a couple of those changes. On page 5 of the ordinance, one of the issues that arose in its section 14.110.025, it's the permit certification requirements. So currently we do have certain massage therapists in town that might not have their certification from the state. They might not have enough hours. It's 500 hours. And are under the old ordinance, they only required 300 hours. And so how I had written it is they would have automatically not been able to continue to work because they didn't have their state certification. So I think in fairness, we've put in an effective date to take place for the massage therapists of July of 2017. So it gives them an extra 6 months. So an establishment would still need to get their permit for an establishment. The masseuses that work for the establishment will either have to get their certification from the state prior to the July 17th. So I've inserted just in there in the B section, the C section, that it would be effective July 1st of 2017, where it talks about that a person must have a massage therapist or a certified massage practitioner's license, and that means from the state. So that'll give them a little bit of time, and I think that's fair. If they were lacking in any of the hours required. The other change is just on page 8 in the title of section 14.110.040. It should have said massage instead of massage therapist permit. That should read massage establishment permit. So I failed to catch that change. And then the last one, that's just a minor change on page 12 of 20. We require the employee to wear an identification that says that they're certified. A few massage therapists called in and said, well, I wear mine around if I wear it around my neck while I'm giving a massage, it makes it very difficult. So we've changed that just to where instead of wear, that they would just have to have it on their possession. So it's not any major changes, but those are the 3 that I've caught right now from people that have called in and asked questions about it. We did get some inquiries about it. But this will, again, comply with state law. It'll allow us quite a bit more flexibility with massage establishments that are not operating pursuant to state law or violating the law to allow for us to revoke the establishment permits where before we could not revoke any type of permits that were issued by the state. So it gives us much more local control. And with that, I'll open up for any questions.
Questions of staff? Seeing none. This is a public hearing, and I do have one card for public testimony. Anyone else wishing to address us, please submit a card. We have a card from Patty Rice.
Thank you again for hearing my comments, and I appreciate the cooperation of the town staff in answering some of my questions to this point. Again, my name is Patty Rice. I'm with the Spa Los Gatos. We've been in business since 1999, and I employ about 20 massage therapists. I am all for regulating this industry, and in fact worked with Captain Alana Forrest back in 2007 in developing the original town licensing program. My concern with the current revisions is requiring all therapists to transition to the CAMTC licensing. I believe the length of time given for current holders of the town license is too short. I have several therapists who have worked for me for well over 10 years. This is their livelihood, and they've worked hard to develop their clientele. They are professional, loyal, and dedicated to their craft. They've been performing massage for many years, even before I hired them, and well before CAMTC was even established in 2009. Some of the schools where they worked have closed. CAMTC will not acknowledge those educational hours from closed schools. They may have to start all over. CAMTC also no longer offers the 300-hour massage therapist practitioner license, and you can only get the certified massage therapist license, which is 500 hours. I also have other therapists who are focused on other educational and career opportunities. For example, one is studying to be a nurse, one's working to complete her master's to become a family counselor, and another is pursuing aesthetics. They may need a little additional time to balance the massage therapy education along with what their current studies are. But again, this is their livelihood. We have also experienced lengthy delays when sending new hires over to the CAMTC for licensing. It's typical that their process will take 8 weeks or more once we submit the paperwork. I would ask that you allow these individuals more time, perhaps 18 months if they're currently employed, to meet with the CAMTC requirements. We've been short-staffed in our massage department for nearly 2 years. While we enjoy great longevity with our current staff, it is challenging to find qualified massage therapists to work at the spa, and I hate the thought of losing my long-term people because of a change like this. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I believe that the change of date that staff suggested was July of 2017. And as I'm quickly adding months, that sort of seems like, oh no, that's only 6. What would your date be?
I'd like to see like 18 months, because the people who have gone to schools where they've closed, they're going to start over. They're going to have to go get 500 hours
So
and invest the money.
So we're looking at like July of 2018.
I think that's more reasonable.
Other questions? Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Reading this, I'm trying to understand how you get 500 hours. What I think I see in here, it says you can't work in Los Gatos for money unless you've got a certificate, which is 500 hours. And then it talks about students enrolled in a massage programs, a massage school. So if they were in a school but didn't have 500 hours, could they work for you, or they only can go to the school?
They have to be either licensed through the town or with CAMTC to work for me. You have to have 500 educational hours in school, and part of that is you do an externship at a spa or a chiropractor's office to do hands-on work.
So then during their school getting their hours, they could do an externship with you in Los Gatos, and that would be legal? They wouldn't
It's
have...
not paid.
Okay.
They have to finish their schooling, and then they do an externship.
How long does it take to get 500 hours of schooling?
Like 9 months.
So they work unpaid for 9 months before they can then come and work in Los Gatos? Is that the way this sounds?
If it's somebody starting from scratch, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Again, this is a public hearing. I have no other cards. Does anyone want to address us on this agenda item? Seeing no one coming forward, I will close the public testimony portion of this hearing and look to the council for questions, discussion, motion. Ms. Sayak.
Question of staff. Mr. Schultz, when doing your research on what other cities are doing, what are some of the timeframes that they have adopted to handle this issue of the new hours?
Almost all of them made it immediately requirement.
Really? Okay.
But I certainly understand the speaker's dilemma, and there are people in that dilemma where if the school had closed, the state isn't recognizing them. I don't like giving the full 18 months because that would affect everybody, and there's some that we don't want to give the 18 months to. I think the language of that, if you do currently have your massage permit that was issued by the town, then maybe there's an exception there that we can have as opposed to any new that come in. And that might be a medium ground to make that we could use for the 18-month period. But yeah, I was when the issue came up, and it just came up today, that's the first thing we did is went to the League of California Cities and looked at about 10 different cities and looked at the Santa Clara and the Sunnyvale, and all of them had immediate requirements that went into effect. So they didn't even address this issue.
Let me follow up on that. I can appreciate not going out till July of 2018 to the extent that there might be practitioners who are then allowed to practice without a license. So given the testimony we've received, is it still your position that we take July of 2017 but add a couple of caveats?
Yeah, I think we can allow more time. So from a process standpoint, the way this would work is it goes in effect 30 days after the second reading, which is almost at the end of the year. We would then send out our letters to all of our massage establishments telling them the parameters and what needs to be done. In reality, by the time that all gets done, it will be around the July time frame because we have to come up with the forms that they're going to use. So that's about the reality of it. Even if I didn't put in the July date is when it would kick in. I think that's a good date, July 17th, but put in the one more caveat that will allow the 18-month period or a year period or whatever you feel is the necessary time frame for those that currently do have an existing license within the town but can't obtain certification or are in the process of gaining certification. And I can come back with that language at the second reading for you with a red line.
Questions? May I have a motion? Mr. Leonardis.
I will move that we accept the staff recommendation with the suggestions put forth by the town attorney, that we have an exception for those who are already in the business, and that we give them that exception to July of 2018.
I'm going to second the motion, but rather than the wording in the business, because that certainly could be interpreted broadly, for those who currently have a town license.
I will accept that change.
Thank you, Mr. Leonardis. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously.
I need to read the title.
I have an idea. Why don't the clerk read the title?
Thank you. An ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Los Gatos amending Town Code Chapter 14, Article 11, massage therapy establishments and massage therapy practitioners.
Mr. Schultz, will that take care of it? All right, thank you. Our next agenda item 9, is a conditional use permit application. Two of our council members, Ms. Syak and I, will be recused because of our residential proximity to the applicant. And so what I'm going to do at this point is take a 5-minute break to allow the two of us to leave and to further allow Mr. Leonardis to take over as chair.
We're going to call the meeting back to order. We have one more item on our agenda this evening, and that is agenda item number 9. It is conditional use permit application 16-004. The project location is 50 University Avenue, Suite 180, and this is regarding the wine cellar's request to modify their existing conditional use permit to consider an increase of 60 additional seats, to modify the distribution of the existing seating, and to allow for indoor entertainment before 10 p.m. And we are looking for our staff presentation.
Good evening, council members. Jocelyn Puga, Associate Planner. The subject property is located on the east side of University Avenue, approximately 500 feet north of West Main Street. The applicant wine cellar is requesting to modify their conditional use permit to permit an addition of 60 seats, to modify the distribution of their existing seating, and to allow indoor entertainment before 10 p.m. The applicant is proposing a 2,661 square foot renovation to the existing 3,186 square foot restaurant to allow for the creation of 2 new private dining areas with 60 seats. The application was considered by the Planning Commission on September 28th of this year. The Planning Commission forwarded a recommendation of approval to the Council for the application, subject to the draft conditions, which are included as Exhibit A to Attachment 5, with a modification to condition number 7, which now states indoor entertainment pursuant to the late night entertainment policy is allowed. Staff recommends that the council accept the Planning Commission's recommendation to approve the conditional use permit and to adopt the resolution contained in Attachment 5 with the conditions of approval included as Exhibit A to this attachment. There is also a desk item before you this evening which contains a public comment that was received after the distribution of the staff report. This concludes staff's presentation, and we are happy to assist the council with any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Puga. Any questions for staff from council? Seeing none, I'd like to call the applicant forward. You have 10 minutes, if you'd like.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of the Wine Cellar Restaurant. My name is Steve Hauk. I'm one of the owners. I'm standing next to Lisa Hauk, my sister, who's also a partner in the business. I think everything is pretty self-explanatory in the application, and I think we can look forward to any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Is there any questions for the applicants from our council this evening? All right, seeing none, you may have a seat, and then we will invite the public to speak on this matter. Is there anybody who wishes to speak this evening? Did you fill out a card, sir? No? All right, please come forward and state your name for the record. And
thank you for granting me the time. Paul Matlich, owner of Steamers. I have no problem with the Houts. They're very nice people and do a great job, asset to the community, and as well as Old Town. My concern is the addition of 60 seats, and we do have ordinances that seem to be ignored lately over the expansion of many restaurants in this town. It's quite a crisis in parking. I've lost numerous reservations over and over, calling and saying, tell my wife to come outside. I can't find parking. I don't know where do you explain your parking? 60 seats. We have a parking regulation zoning, and that would go over that, I'm assuming, which already we've had 4 restaurants come into town that, weren't existing, number 1, restaurants. That's in the town ordinance. Number 2, they don't comply with parking. Number 3, we have every restaurant, 80% of the restaurants in this town are over their seating capacity. We have on staff in this community that is being paid by all the taxpayers here that doesn't address any ordinances that aren't being followed, because basically their comment was, yes, there are ordinances, but we really don't enforce them. We don't have time, apparently, they said, which is, I think, a little bit somewhat ridiculous. If we don't enforce rules, why do we have rules? It's kind of like a cowboy affair, I guess. I don't know. Maybe you have it worked out with federal on where's your expansion going to take place?
if you could please address the council only.
Where does expansion take place? I don't understand it. You guys are underneath the building or downstairs. So additional square footage comes from what area? Do you have that on a drawing anywhere?
We will address your questions to staff, and they will answer them.
Okay, and then as far as parking capacity, I mean, I'm in favor of what they're trying to do. I have no problem with the music. That's up to the neighborhood to decide, and you guys. And given the situation, everybody in town right now is trying to cut, a piece of a pie that got divided way too many ways. I've heard it from Johnny Hannigan, from Nick, and everybody, that everybody is just scrambling for customers as well as that. And then we have created more of a parking problem, then it's just adding on to more of the issues that we're all trying to deal with. My concern is 60 seats. Is that continually 60 seats? And what is the music? Is the music going to be a Thursday, Friday night, Saturday night entertainment? We're turning it into a club? Or are we looking at a restaurant? That's my concern. But my main concern is the fact that we don't have the parking spaces for 60 seats in this town. It's as simple as that. I mean, if we all look at our ordinances, I believe in progress and going forward, and if it's going to help your business, but we've all had to, rely by these rules for the last, I've been here 37 years and never once was given a break past any ordinance. So I'm just concerned about these issues not being followed anymore, and it's created a cluster downtown that's not being addressed. So,
All right, thank you for your comments.
that's all I care about is the parking situation being addressed in Los Gatos.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on this item this evening? Seeing none, we can invite the applicant back up, and you have 5 more minutes to speak if you would like to address any of the concerns raised by the public.
Well, I appreciate the comments. Not sure if they raise any questions in your minds. I'd like to hear if they do. I believe that staff has taken a good look at the parking situation. They've worked out details with the landlord, as Mark mentioned. Paul, pardon me. I personally don't think that there's a parking issue. I addressed that at the Planning Commission. When we first reopened in 2001, we regularly had to park down at the baseball field on weekends and holidays. But right now, I can pretty much find parking anywhere, almost any day of the week, aside from maybe 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. So, not sure how that's an issue at this point, actually, in our experience. Although I do appreciate his comment, I don't see it as being an issue.
So we have a question from Council Member Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Hauk. I just wanted to confirm some things with you that were part of the Planning Commission report and the hearing, and also part of our staff report. It's my understanding that your expansion is going into the part of the former border space, and it consists of office, storage, and 2 private dining rooms, correct?
Yes.
And that with respect to parking, you've worked out an agreement with the owner of the shopping center for 20 additional spaces to be credited to your business. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And with respect to the entertainment that you're asking for, you're just asking to conform with the new entertainment policy, which allows entertainment up to 10 p.m. You're not seeking anything beyond 10 p.m. or something that's outside of the current policy. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for the applicant this evening? I have one question for you. Considering that you are in close proximity to some houses, Edelin Avenue primarily, would you be amenable to perhaps an administrative review by our staff after about 6 months, just to make sure that there are no neighborhood concerns from the newly adopted entertainment?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further questions, we will officially close the public hearing and move to council for deliberations. Thank you. Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mr. Leonardis, Chair Leonardis. Question for staff. So we do have rules about parking, and can you review for me? My understanding is, for a certain number of seats, we have to have certain other parking places, and they have to either be on site or as part of the parking district are our rules. So how do they meet the requirements for parking?
So that's correct. So the zoning code requires 1 parking space for every 3 seats for this particular use. So with the addition of 60 seats, they're now required to provide 67 parking spaces. The federal has granted them an additional 20 parking spaces, so they are now in compliance with the number of seats they're proposing. Additionally, staff has worked with federal to get an updated parking table for all of the uses on the property. So the property has a combination of on-site parking and then credit in the parking assessment district. So after completing our parking table, the property has an excess of 153 parking spaces between the combination of on-site parking and credit in the district.
So if I could just follow up it. So that means of all of the uses in Old Town, which I guess is the landlord, they're not using all of their parking credits currently?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions or motion? Councilmember Jensen?
Okay, I'll try a motion. And my motion is that we follow the recommendation of the Planning Commission that was actually passed unanimously, and they did receive input from Steamers at Planning Commission as well. We've had one public comment by way of email from a neighbor, which it was in support of the application. Pursuant to our staff report, they have met their traffic and parking requirements. They are only asking to be in conformance with our new entertainment policy. So my motion is to allow the increase in permitted seats from 140 to 200, to allow redistribution of seating. And I was actually kind of curious about that because we had the discussion of a seat is a seat is a seat is a seat. So I think that you can put it where you want, but be that as it may, it's in there. And that you may have indoor entertainment prior to 10 p.m. in conformance with our new entertainment policy. And in addition, that is come back for administrative review by our staff in 6 months to determine whether or not it is working as we intend.
Mr. Rennie.
I'll second the motion.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. It passes unanimously. Thank you. That is our last agenda item. Oh, yes, and on the vote, of course, the mayor and the vice mayor have been recused. So passing unanimously is the 3 remaining council members on the dais. And that is our last item this evening. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.